So hi guys, welcome back to our tutorials. In today's tutorial, we are going to create this HTML table, and it has some nice features. When you hover over these tables, the rows are scaling up. And also we have a select that selects how many you want to show, but this one doesn't work because we're just creating a HTML template, and then you have a search here. And the cool thing about the search is that it has an icon that is placed inside the input. So let's get started. So the very first thing you can see, we have this search icon. This one comes from Font Awesome. So let's go to cdn.js and look for Font Awesome library. And then we copy the Font Awesome CDN link. So as we said on our previous tutorials, is that the CDN link is basically a way for us to get the CSS, the Font Awesome CSS, because without the CSS, then these icons won't work. So you have several options. One of the options is to host this CSS as we could with our style.css. But by using a CDN, we get some added advantages, and also we don't host this CSS for ourselves. And with the CDN, it's a bit faster. So we just copy the second link tag and then paste it on your HTML document and then save. So just that, and then close that. So the next thing is that we have a blank CSS file. So we are going to link it to our document by using link, then CSS. Then this is always the default style.css. So this is what we are going to use. So we are done with that section. So the very next thing is to start creating the table. So I'm going to create this table inside a main tag. And then before I even continue now, let me go back to my style.css. And then we add some default styles. So the very first thing I want to import a font. So the font I want is called Roboto. So we are going to fonts.google.com and then search for Roboto. And then make sure that you can see the button get font, click on it. Then get embed code. So here is where all your selected fonts will be listed. So if you have a font that you don't care about, you just delete it. And then you're just left with the desired font. Mine is Roboto. You can use another font as you like. And then the next thing is now let's go to the import, web import, and then copy the import URL. You don't need to copy the style tag because we are already in the CSS file. Save that and then let's go back. So the next thing is to add some default CSS styles for every element. We remove the margins on every element. We remove the paddings. And then we add a property called box sizing border box, which now this property enables us to specify the box sizing of. So the box sizing is essentially the paddings, the space. It's like a box. So I don't know whether I can draw the box. So just assume there is a box. Inside the box represents an element. Like for instance, we have a main element. Think of this as a box. So what happens when we give a width to this element? That one is okay. We can get a width. But now the issue, I don't know whether I can. Let me see whether I can get some mirror board. Okay, let me look for whiteboard online. Just want to show you what happens. I think, let's see this one. Let's also try the mirror board. So let me just show you real quick what happens. So let's use this one. And then I just want to show you how the box sizing works. So we are going to reference this main element. Or maybe we could, yeah. So it's already loaded up. So as I said, now the box sizing property. So this one is still loading. I don't know how long. Let me grab a pen and then let's create a box. It's very tough to draw here. So undo that, straight line box. Okay, we have a box. Now this one represents our main element. Typing here is crazy. So our main element. So what if we give this main element some width of 200 pixels? Typing here is crazy. 200 pixels and maybe a height of 100 pixels. So here is what the box sizing border box property does. So what happens when I add some paddings to this element? Remember, the padding is the space between the element's edges or the element's boundaries. So let me draw a new content here. Let me use a different color. I don't know. This one is too large. Let's use that one. So let's assume we added a padding. So this is what padding, this is the content. And padding, whatever padding does is that padding is the space between the actual content and the edges. So this one is the, let me use this one is the padding. So if you said like 10 pixels, this one is too huge. So let's use that, and I don't know whether you can change the color. Okay, but there's no issue. So let's assume this one is 10 pixels. The padding is 10 pixels. So even here it's 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 10 pixels. So what am I telling you? So this section here, this section inside with the green color, this is the padding. But we say the padding is 10 pixels. So what happens to the width? Should the width just contribute to the content? And what about the padding? This one is 10 pixels now, and this one is 10. So the total width here is 220. But this is not a desired effect. This is not a desired effect by what you want to achieve. So what box sizing border box does, it says, let my 200 pixels, so let me undo this. Let me undo. Let my 200 pixels be inclusive of the paddings. So that means this one still remains at 200 pixels. But the content is now squeezed by 10 pixels. So 10 pixels is, so this one is the content. Now the content width is 200 minus, this one is 10, 10. So 200 minus 10, so the content width now is 180 pixels. This is our desired effect, so that's what the box sizing property border box does. We have others, but now I hope you have an overview of what the box sizing border box does. So now let's not waste more time. Let's now continue to, let's select the body of the element, and then let's first specify the font family. So we imported a font, and then now let's use it and specify that this is the font we want to use. So as you can see here on the top, that the font is called Roboto font. So we are going to specify the font family as that name. And then as a fallback, we are going to use sans serif. And then before I go live, I can add a primary color, which is hash 73 74 93. Fantastic. So then we can go back and go live. Can't see much because the main element is still empty. So let's create these elements, and then you'll be good to go. So the first thing you're going to create is this header section. As you can see, we have talked about this several times. You have to get the mental picture of what we are building. So you can see here, we have a header section with two elements, the left-hand element and the right-hand element. The left-hand element has three more elements, and the right-hand side just has one. So we are going to create dot header, a div with a class of header, and then we can create a left-hand section. And then we can also create a right-hand section, but let's call it now input group. So why did I call it input group? Because an input by default in CSS does not, or in HTML does not come with a search icon. So we need to fix this search icon inside the input. That's why I added an input of type input group. I created a wrapper div of type input group. So let's also create the input. And then you can say search. So we are not going to add the names and the IDs because we are not submitting the search. We also need to add some placeholders. So placeholder search. That's fantastic. And then we need this icon. So we can go to Font Awesome and look for, let's look for a search icon. So on top you can search. So you can see it, just click it. And then copy, just click the eye, it will copy. And then I think we don't have another icon. We also have another icon. But now we just add that there. We are going to place this inside the absolute to the input group. And then you can give this 100% width so that everything looks okay. Let's go to the left-hand section. As we said, the left-hand section has 3 elements. The first element is this text that says show. So we can still use a paragraph and say show. The next element is a select. So we can use a select. So we don't need the name, the ID, we don't need all this. So the select, and then inside the select, we create options. So I'm not going to use the values. You're not going to submit, but if you are submitting, we could need the values. So I'm just going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 2, 3, 4, 5. And then finally, we have another paragraph that says entries. So we just create paragraph entries. You're done with that section. If you come here on top, now on the live section, you'll see it there. So before we proceed, let's first place this table to the center. So we go back to the body and display it flex and justify content to the center. Something else we will need to add is to add a padding of 2 rem around the body. Then now you can see where this places itself. Then let's grab the main element. Remember, the main element is what holds everything. You can see the main element holds everything. So what I'm going to do here on the main element is, first, let's restrict it with its width to 600 pixels. Fantastic. And then we need some spacing between the 2 elements. So we have the header and the table. We need this space. We can use flexbox for the same. So we're going to say display flex direction of column, and a gap of maybe 0.5 rem. And you're done with that section. The next thing is, let's now tackle the header. We just want to place, we said the header has 2 elements, the left hand element and the right hand element. So let's now go to the header. We can say dot header display flex line items to the center, justify content space between. So we go back, you can see now we have those 2 elements, justified space between, and then we can see the entries here. So now we can go to the left hand section. We give it a class of left, this one, and then we can just do dot left display flex as well, because now we need to place this side by side. Then they are too close to each other. We add a gap of 0.5 rem. Fantastic. And then we need to align these items to the center. You can say align items to the center. Then now we can do this. So next thing, let's capture the select. So the select is inside the left. Left select. We only have one select, so we can just do dot left and then select. And then we can give it a width of 40 pixels. Fantastic. This is nice. So the next thing is these paragraphs. So let's change their colors. So we can say dot left direct child paragraph, and then we can say a font size of 0.8 rem, and then the color should be hash. Let's use the primary color. Fantastic. You can see them, looks nice. The next thing is the input group. So as you said, now on the header section, you have the left-hand section and the right-hand section. So the right-hand section is what that has the input and the search icon. So how can we, so it's the input and the search icon. So we have this and the search. So we want to give this a fixed width, and then we can give this 100% width, and then we can press this absolute to the parent. So we are going to say dot input group width 200 pixels. Okay, fantastic. And then the next thing is now position relative, because we want to place the icon absolute to it. And then let's prevent overflows of the elements. The next thing, let's now grab the input. We can say dot input group input, and then in the input we can give it a width of 100%. Now you can see the icon now moves to the top, but that's not the issue. Let's also add some background color to the input. So you can say background color of white. So that won't change anything. So let's now fix the border. So you can say border none. And then so a border of none, and then let's add some padding. So you can say padding vertical 8 pixels, horizontal 10 pixels. Okay. And then the next thing, I think we lost some of the, you need to label the border as 1 pixel, solid, gray. Fantastic. But I think we need to add this to the parent, or yeah, no, not a must, because the input has the width of 100%, so still the same thing. So now let's grab the icon and place it inside the input. So you can also add a border radius of 5 pixels. So now let's grab the input icon. The icon, the first thing, we change the color to primary color. You can see it. And then let's now position it absolute. You can see now everything moves to the center. Then we need first to place it 50% from the top. So we can say 50% top, 50%. So this is what this one happens. So when you set up 50%, it starts drawing at 50%, which means this is not in the middle. So I think we need to open mirror board. So let me open it once more. So what I'm saying is that when I say top 50%, it moves from the top to 50%, but now it starts drawing from the 50%, not in the middle. So let me just show you real quick. So let's bring a new, so this one might go. So what we are going to do now is we want to see the top. So let's create some box. So this one is top 0%. This one is top 100%. And then this one is now bottom 0%. And then bottom 100%. Yeah. So let's go to the 50% mark. So we want to place our search icon here. But now, when you do top 50%, let me use a different color. Let's use this one. So when you do top 50%, comes to the 50% mark. This is the 50% mark. But now it draws our search icon there. So what do we need to push this search to just place it exactly as this? So we can divide the search icon by 2. We can see that we need to push it backwards on the top axis by 50% of its width. So what can we do now here? So what we can do is that we need to transform, then translate y, and then we push it back 50%. And then now you can see it lies exactly in the center. And then we can push it towards the right hand section by saying right of, now let's use left of 3%. You can see where it lies. The next thing is to push the search icon, the cursor position of the search, away a little bit. So we can do padding left on the input. So padding left, something like 30 pixels. How we achieve the required result. We're not going to dwell too much there. So the next thing we need to create is the table itself. So this is how the table works. You start with the table. So you start with the table. So let's go back and now start creating. So we are done with the header. And then now we can do a table. Inside the table, the tables have rows. So this is the first row, the second row, the third row, the fourth row, the fifth row. But now one of the rows is the header. The header meaning that this is what carries the labels. So we are going to create a table row. How can we differentiate from header labels and just the data? We use a special tag called table header. So we can use first name. So I'm going to add the, let me use a paragraph here. And then you can do the first name. So, and then the icon for that, you can go to Font Awesome and look for an angle down icon. But for my case, I'm just going to copy paste it there. This is how it looks like. And then we can copy this down 3 more times. So 1, 2, 3. And then this one should be last name. And then this one is the email. And then this one is the created at. Go to the finished version. This is what we are with. So let's also go back to, let's add the input as a background. No, we don't need that. Okay. Let's also add some background colors to the body. So the background color, let's go back to the body. And the background color is hash F1, F3, FE. You can see now the background color has changed. So the next thing is that these table rows, this first table row, let's first add some gaps between the header and that section. So you can do maybe one of them. That's fantastic. The next thing is to place the table headers side by side with the drop down icon. So how we are going to do this is we are going to do, so let's start with the table heads, but we need their divs. So that's how we did this, because we have table heads. So we need to place this inside divs. The reason is that we don't want to joke around with the CSS table default styles, because for instance, this table head has a display of table cell, but now if I try to say display flex, now I'm overriding what was the initial version. So I can also do a div. And then the next one, we can do a div here as well. The next one, you can do a div. Then you can grab all these and say, table heads give us the direct children div, and then you can display these flex. I can see they are side by side. Then you can see the icon is not aligned with the text. So we can do align items to the center. Fantastic. And then let's add some gaps. Point to rem. Fantastic. And then let's change the color. So we can say color hash 73, 74, 93. Fantastic. We are done with that section. The next section is now to add the data itself, and then we can style it and call this a day. So we are done with the first table row, which was the table row for table headers. So can collapse that, and then we can create another table row. But now instead of using table headers, we are going to use table data. So you can say table data, and then you just fill some random data. So you can say Manuel. The last name is Saturn. The next one is let's just dump some. Finally, let's do 1206. And then I'm just going to copy some more by just dumping this 1, 2, 3. Fantastic. So we are left with that. So we can go back to the CSS. If you go back to the CSS, then we can do all table heads and all table datas, margin bottom of 5 rem. So that one seems not to work. So we can get rid of that, and then we can do a padding 0.6 rem, 0.8 rem. Fantastic. This one looks now nice. The next thing we need to work on is now adding some background color to the table rows. So table row, but we don't want to add the background colors on the first table row. So we can say table row, and then we can use the not operator in CSS. Looks like a function, and then not first child. So what does this evaluate to? This one says, give me a table row that is not the first child. So it will give you all the other table rows, but not the first table row. And then what we can do here is a background color of white. You can see it. And then a transition, because we are going to add some animation, we want a transition of 0.2 seconds. The next thing you can realize is that the table cells have multiple borders. So how can we collapse all these? We can go now and grab the table. And then what you need is border spacing. 0, then 5 pixels. So this one now will go ahead and remove the borders on the horizontal and add the borders on the vertical axis. So the final thing we need to add is the animation. So we are going to add a hover effect on this element. So we can just copy this down, and then now we can add the hover state. And then when it's hovered, we just add a cursor pointer, and then a transform scale 1.05. Now if you go back, you can see now it is scaling, but we can add some box shadow. So to get box shadow, go to box shadow, CSS dash box shadow. So this one, the website is called Get CSS Scan. So in here we can get some very nice box shadows. If you scroll, so we can scroll. I think I like this one. I can just select this one, and then let's go to the finished version and add some box shadows. Let's start in. Now when you hover, you can see the box shadow as well. Fantastic. And then let's change the color of the table data. So we can say color hash 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Fantastic. And that's it, guys. That's how you can create a HTML table using HTML and CSS, and also doing some basic styles on them. Thank you for watching, and see you next in the next tutorials. Thank you. Make sure you follow for more.